All right, hey, we're live. Hey, my name's Mike. That's Ricky over there, and that's Charlie over there. Thanks, guys, for joining me on the stream.
Thanks for having us. You know, I'm a fan of the show, so any chance to come in and chat with you about the wonderful world of weirdos, I'm into it.
It always amazes me when I meet a fan. It's weird, but there are a few out there, I guess. I appreciate you listening.
I just had my own brand new podcast, and I just assumed that there were like 6 people listening to it. I didn't think that anyone was actually paying attention. And then I saw the rankings that it was up a little bit higher than what I thought. I was like, wow, it's actually going out there and people are listening. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think now is a good time too to get into the podcast game, because anybody who's going against the grain, I think, is getting a little bit more attention than normal. I've been getting more feedback from fans and listeners of the show all over the world than ever, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are really looking for answers, for alternative perspective. They're looking for some type of understanding on what's going on, and anybody who is not just regurgitating the mainstream narrative, I think people are appreciating that, especially with the fact that like there's so much like public shaming on like, what are you doing getting together with your friends, and what are you doing for taking your kids out and all this stuff, and I take that all on one, try to put out each fire one at a time with like these little debates online. But for the most part, people seem to be, even the people who disagree with you, if you take the time, which sometimes is way more time than it's worth, but in a lot of cases, you talk to them logically about these issues, and I'll be kind of vague with what issues we're referring to, just because there's been so much censorship.
We can use abbreviations, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I talked about 5G, right?
Cinco? I think
does YouTube know Spanish? But
no. YouTube's racist. It doesn't know Spanish.
But yeah, so I think, have you guys kind of found the same thing in regards to your shows, that you're getting a lot of good feedback in regards to talking about the specific hot topic in a manner that is refreshing, because so many other people are just kind of, I guess, falling for the fear mongering?
So when it comes to my show, Our Big Dumb Mouth, I think people listen because everyone feels alone and no one really has an answer. So we might as well all be alone together, kind of speculate and try to figure this out as we go along. It's like we're all holding hands and walking backwards. And
isn't that one? Oh,
that's just what it feels like to me. And so it's kind of like we should all just talk to each other, be a little bit more compassionate, be a little bit more patient with each other. And I haven't gotten too much feedback, but people just appreciate talking about it.
Well, I saw my numbers spike in Australia and Hong Kong, and I started to think, well, these are some places where they're experiencing firsthand a lot of crackdowns on liberties. At least Hong Kong was before this latest epidemic, with their rioting in the street. And of course, Australia, the people of Australia are fantastic, but the government is a disaster. And so I think that there's a lot of people that are fed up in their own country, and then they're looking at podcasts that are talking about things that are relevant to them. And, unfortunately for all of us, the authoritarian crackdown or the censorship or things like this is becoming a bit universal. So I'm talking about it here in the United States, but it's getting interest and getting picked up on in countries, all the way on the other side of the world for me, because we have this common theme of government overreach and censorship and all of this. And they want to know that, I think they want to hear what's going on in the US and see how it compares to their current situations.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of that. People from like the UK and other parts of the world hitting me up and saying like, hey, how is it in the US? And it seems like everybody's kind of going through the same thing, where nobody really knows anybody who's directly, like, either they're not directly affected by this, or they don't know anybody who's directly seriously affected by this, but yet the media is saying everybody's affected by this and stay at home. And, so it seems like it's this reoccurring theme. I had Whitney Webb on recently. She was in Chile, same thing. I asked her what's going on in Chile, similar situation where she's like, well, they're telling you to stay at home and whatnot, but I don't know anybody who's sick. I don't know anybody who's died. I had a Portuguese MMA fighter who went back to Portugal after his Bellator match was canceled recently. And same thing. I asked him, like, what's going on in Portugal? And he actually lived in northern Portugal, where supposedly it was the worst. And he kind of felt like, okay, yeah, the news is saying all these things are going on, and the sky's falling, but I'm not seeing it, So, and in America, it's kind of similar too, where I'm hearing all these cases, I'm hearing all these deaths, but I don't know anybody who's sick. I mean, I know people who know people supposedly, but obviously, I mean, if anybody's been following me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, like, I've been constantly sharing articles about how we can't trust the data because there's so many issues with, I mean, there was that Montana doctor, I shared the video recently in regards to her completely questioning the way they're coming up with these deaths and what they're contributing to it, and all the fuckery that's going on with that. So it's just like, you have contaminated tests. There's no gold standard, right? There's a bunch of different tests. So it's like, we don't even know what they're testing for. And because there's so many people that seem like they could profit from this and gain from this, how hard would it be to, and even the CDC, their guidelines say, if you assume this to be the cause of death, then you can basically put under death certificate. So it's just, I think that thing that bothers me the most, it's like, so many people are like, if you just stay at home and just do the right thing, stay at home. So it's become one of those things where it's like, if you say anything against the grain, you're being selfish and you don't care about the greater good of humanity and whatnot. And I think people aren't looking at, well, all this reaction was caused because of this speculated data and these numbers and the supposed cause of death was this thing. But if we're unpacking that and we find out that, like, all those things are kind of subjective, they're not concrete evidence, and there's a lot of questions, then, in other words, you can question the reaction. You can question all this. And I think people aren't doing that. People are, I've been saying it a lot. It's like the boiling frog thing. It's like you throw a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you slowly warm up the water, it won't know it's in boiling water eventually. And that's kind of like how we've been. It's like initially remove, it's like no more than 100 people, then no more than 50 people, then no more than 20 people. Now don't go around anybody and be 6 feet away. Like, it's just like, it's slowly, we're kind of giving up our rights and anything we enjoy in life, that next thing you know, it's martial law, and you didn't realize that you're giving it up little by little. So your thoughts on that, I guess?
I don't know anyone personally affected by this. I do believe something is going on. Like somebody in the chat just said, Jesse Kramer, you have to assume hundreds of thousands of health professionals from all around the world are in on it, though. I think that's a valid point. Like you said, the numbers that were used to originally make some of the lockdown decisions have been changed. So I think it was the Royal Imperial Academy that originally, correct me if I'm wrong, may have got that name wrong, but that initially did the models. Well, they rolled those numbers back, but decisions were already made, and now we're living with the consequences of those decisions based upon faulty models.
But you're referring to Neil Ferguson numbers, yeah.
I believe so. And you're right. We live in a culture of shame, where if you dare question something or believe something different than the mainstream narrative, you are shamed. You are, and it's kind of weird. It goes counter to what you would expect from a more liberal mindset, where you should be artistic and free and express yourself. No, you're shamed into believing what they believe or nothing at all. It's an unfortunate culture of shame we're all part of right now.
Yeah, and I have a problem with the source of the information that we got. So early on, we heard about all of this. Everything that we got came from the Chinese government, the Chinese media, the United States government, the United States media, and the CDC. These are 5 institutions that have zero credibility. They've been busted lying so many times. It's hard to even keep track of it all. So excuse me if I don't just instantly jump on board with the panic train, because I have problems with the source of the information. Now, it may be that they're 100% right, that all this stuff is playing out exactly as they say it is, and it's all organic and it's truthful. And this is the one time they decided that they were all going to tell the truth. But I'm not holding my breath on that. And so when I examine this, I just have to take a look at, this is an example of the boys who cried wolf. And the media has lied to us so many times about so many minor things that when it comes to now a pandemic, what, I'm supposed to just suspend all of my history with the mainstream media and go, yeah, you were lying to me then, but now you're telling me the truth? Well, maybe they are. But it's understandable for me to be skeptical of this because I don't believe them. So when they say the numbers are this, I just think to myself, this sounds like unemployment numbers. You know, when they give you the unemployment, they go, oh, well, unemployment's 5%. And then you realize, well, they changed the way they calculate unemployment numbers because they're doing this to make this president look good. And you realize all these numbers are useless. All the charts, all the polls, all the stats, they're all useless. So you guys have lied to us about all these numbers in the past. So, but now I'm supposed to believe you? I just can't. I can't. Now, to piggyback off what you're saying, Ricky, I don't know anybody who's sick either. I do believe people are sick. I do believe this is actually happening to some people. But as far as in my world of who I know and what I've seen, I don't know anybody with it. I don't know anybody that's died from it. I do know people who have died from it. So, and I believe my friends, so I have no reason to not believe them. But it's just that it's very strange how it's not happening for everyone. You've got people going all around the world, going to hospitals and filming the lack of activity going on in hospitals. And it's one of those things where you go, look, I hear you. I hear you that it's a big pandemic and that everybody, that everything's overflowing, but I've got a question. Why are all of these hospitals all over the world totally empty? Somebody needs to explain that, because
so I heard that. I heard, yeah. I'll address that right now. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I heard, so here's the explanation to that, is that during the pandemic, you do not take people stricken with the infection to the hospital. You take them to a secondary location like the ball fields or the tent cities. That's what I heard. I don't know what is true or not.
Okay.
Well, I know people who work at ERs locally, and they've said that, like, when people come in and they want to get tested, they're like, unless you have severe symptoms, they just send them back home. And this is I don't know if he's a manager or supervisor at a local hospital in Springfield, Massachusetts, and he says, he's like, one, I wouldn't want to do that test unless I really had to, because that swab goes really far up your nose. He's like, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. And he's like, the second thing, he's like, unless you have really bad symptoms, he's like, it's not, he's like, we're not just going to test you for the heck of it. He's like, for the most part, I tell people to go back home. He's like, just go home. If you don't have bad symptoms, don't worry about it. And I think that's the thing. So everybody who's saying things like, well, everybody has to be in on it. Well, that's like questioning, well, does everybody have to be in on it when we're pushing weapons of mass destruction to go to war? Did everybody have to be in on it when we obviously were lied to about September 11th? It's like, no, not everybody has to be in on it. The thing about this is that I believe people are dying, but even if all these deaths were contributed to the flu, we could still report about it the exact same way, just call it the flu, and you'd have the same amount of deaths. Like, nothing would change. So I'm not saying people aren't dying of viruses and things aren't happening. I'm saying is that, one, it's obvious that there's more than meets the eye. When you look at the initial reports, how obvious that they were pushing only numbers that were negative, like how many cases, how many deaths. I mean, the very beginning of this, I picked up on how interesting it was that they weren't giving you any other detail that might be optimistic. Everything was very negative. It was like, okay, there's 60 deaths in America. They didn't tell you anything about it all being in one nursing home. They didn't tell you anything about it even being in one state. They just gave you that number, and they're just telling you how the number is going to increase this much and that much and this much, So, and anytime they have a high estimate, they'll share that with you. It could be this, but they don't tell you how, like, they don't spend much time talking to you about, the lower estimates, the fact that they could be way off. I mean, Dr. Fauci was a part of the AIDS epidemic task force, and he had ridiculous numbers that were really high. And now he looks back, and I think he was quoted saying, well, I'm glad that we at least scared people to take it seriously. So
Yes.
he's completely okay with doing that, with just scaring people to take it seriously. And then you look at, like, so the media has obviously done some serious, shady things in regards to how they're reporting it, what they're reporting, what they're leaving out. I mean, Dr. Birx during one press conference said it, 99% of deaths in Europe were old people with pre-existing conditions. She said this, 99%. And this is, somebody who's a part of the task force, reviewing all the information, having these conferences every day, having meetings every day, talking to scientists and doctors from all over the world. And she said this. And why wasn't that clip used in any of the news reporting on the press conference? Because it's reassuring, because it might actually make you feel better. In that same press conference, I forget which date it was when she said this, but she's like, to the parents out there, like, she was talking about, young people who are dying from it. She's like, you're fine. Like, don't be scared. And she was talking about, like, the chances of a young person or a toddler or a baby dying of this is so minimal and yet, like, why isn't anybody reporting that? Like, we don't want to report that. We want to report, they want to keep milking the cow, and the cow is fear mongering and scaring people, and that keeps people watching, and so that's what they do. They'll just keep milking it, and either it's intentional or unintentional, either it's ratings or whatnot. But you look at, like, the media, the mainstream media, the fact that it's like it's a for-profit department. I mean, back in the day, you hear about, like, the media didn't make money. Like, that was you just knew that those shows were just there for the greater good of humanity. They're not there to really make a profit. Like, you made profit somewhere else. And now it's like, no, they're money makers. And Big Pharma has a hand in that. The military industrial complex. I mean, you hear stories like, Phil Donahue, who had the top-rated show on MSNBC, I believe, and then they pulled him because he wouldn't stop talking about the Iraq War and being anti the Iraq War. Like, so obviously there's more than meets the eye. And then there's all these things like, like I said, the inconsistencies with doctors all agreeing with the testing, like which test is accurate, are they not accurate, all the inconsistencies with just, I mean, look at the numbers, like, from one source to another, nobody can agree on the numbers. So there's so much there. But the thing is too, I think a big thing is, like, I think the majority of people were so caught up in their everyday lives of going to work, doing their chores, watching sports, doing everything, that they were so naive to the fact that people die every day. Like, this isn't a fucking new phenomenon. Like, people are dying. People are continually dying. You go to hospitals, there's still people dying of cancer. There's still people dying of other things right now. And if CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News wanted to dedicate their shows on reporting on every single death of cancer, they could also spend 24/7 talking about one more death of cancer in Montana, one more death of cancer in Nashville, one more death of cancer in Massachusetts and New England, wherever. Like, it would also, if they reported on cancer deaths the same way they report on these deaths, then eventually it would also start scaring the public. It eventually it would seem like this overwhelming thing that we have to acknowledge, and it would seem very similar, I mean, in my opinion.
So the aspect that I've been trying to pay attention to more than the media is the military's response. Because if it was BS, and I don't think that it is BS, I would imagine that the military would call BS and not be so gung-ho to redeploy assets that would be needed for other fronts. Secretary Esper, the defense secretary, is basically put in charge of the defense and military's response to this. And you have Northcom being mentioned, General Osaneshi, and then a brand new Joint Chiefs of Staff. So the military is responding to this and coordinating with FEMA. So there is real things going on. There's real activity happening. The media is using it. And I think you're right. I think the numbers are being trumpeted to swing one way or another, and it just depends on what model they use. I read an article recently that New York City hasn't had heart attacks recently because everything is being attributed to the cause of death being a virus. You know, so no one's dying from natural causes anymore. It's all being attributed to one thing, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, but isn't go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think there's another component of this that we have to be mindful of. And Ricky, you and I have talked about this before on your show. There is a thing called the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, which legalized propaganda inside the United States. Now, I think a case can be made that they were lying to us well before that, but for whatever reason, they decided to legalize it and make this change. It wasn't the original Smith-Mundt Act wasn't set to expire. It didn't need to be changed, but under the Obama administration, they went in and made changes to it and stuffed it in the NDAA to pass that through to legalize a certain number of hours per week that the government of the United States can lie to the American people. It's up to you to figure out which hours it is that you're actually being lied to, but they went ahead and passed that. And I would remind people that the government doesn't take steps like that to make something a new law if they didn't intend to use it. So you can bet your sweet ass that you're going to get propaganda. The only question is, where is it in this sausage of media information? Is it everything? Is it part of it? Is it like a really good lie where it's like 80% truth and 20% lie? Like where's the mix and where's the lie in this? So it's something for people to consider that, you know, maybe if they're unsure of their relationship with the corporate media, well, maybe they're telling us, or the government for that matter, you know, well, I trust them. And in a situation like this, I feel like they would be straight with me. Maybe they would, but just remember, they made sure that it is now legal for them to lie to you if they choose to. So it's something that people should consider.
I have a quick question for you guys. This goes down the conspiracy rabbit hole of this being some military takeover. And this is since President Trump has been giving his talks, his daily briefings, that since he's not talking in front of a presidential seal, he is not actually the president of the United States. And that this is actually a military operation and there has been like a quiet military coup. And it all comes down to the presidential seal. And this kind of goes to like the some weird kind of sovereign citizen stuff. And I don't know what to believe on that. Have you guys heard that at all?
I've heard that there isn't a seal on his podium now.
I'll bring it up on screen.
And the flag, I mean, I've heard that. So, I mean, I think I'm sure it's sent all of the Q people into like a frenzy with this, because this is right up their alley. Like, he's giving me coded messages. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. It could just be, it would be fascinating if it was. I don't know for sure what is going on. That's the problem, is that everything has been so muddied up that it's hard to get your bearings and tell what's true. Does it sound like nice that Trump is playing 4D chess and he's making moves and putting bad guys in, you know, and the white hats are, all that stuff sounds awesome. Let's just see it. Okay. Cause I'm done with the Q stuff. I'm done going down that. I'm done with all the Q people saying it's coming. It's coming. Okay. It needs to be here now. If this is a real thing, now's the time. So put up or shut up on the Q. You know what I mean?
Well, in regards to a coup, I mean, one thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is the business plot with Smedley Butler, when a bunch of really wealthy businessmen went to him. He's a retired, but most people might know him from War as a Racket, and retired Marine, was one of the most respected people in the military of his time. And a bunch of wealthy businessmen went to him and wanted to basically put together a coup to take down FDR and take down the government. And do it. And this is documented. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, he obviously didn't go along with it, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think a lot of these things, like, I almost feel like we're living through like 9/11. If I was old enough to understand what was going on during that time, and like we're the people who are going against the grain and saying like there's more than meets the eye. There's absolutely something doesn't make sense. But all the emotional people who are caught up in the event are like, listen, you insensitive assholes, like, who are you to question things? Like, it's about, what about the people and the people who are putting their lives in danger and all this stuff. And it's like, wait, that doesn't mean we disregard everything else. Like, I'm still trying to look at this logically, and look at the censorship, right, Mike? I mean, Mike, you've dealt with it firsthand recently. And
every day. Now, every day that I'm streaming, I'm dealing with it.
yeah. So why is that? I mean, obviously, London Real and their show. I mean, it was the most watched interview live stream ever on YouTube, or second most, or whatever it was. A lot of people watch it. Was my point, and they took it down. And so it's like Brian said in the beginning of that interview, the host of London Real, when he interviewed. I don't even know if I can say his name. I'm concerned. I'm trying to beat around the bush.
David. There we go.
and when he interviewed him, he said, I don't agree with everything you say, but I will defend your right to say it. And it was so that statement was so important. And probably when he interviewed him, he didn't realize how important that statement was, because he didn't know it was going to get pulled. And so why are things getting pulled? Why are things being censored? I mean, only today it was weird, because I uploaded a new podcast, and just randomly from 1 second to another, I had 600 less subscribers on my YouTube channel. And I'm just okay, that's weird. And I'm either they messed up and put too many at one time, or something happened. There's a glitch. But I'm stuff like that. And if all this censorship wasn't happening, I wouldn't think much of it. But because all this weird stuff is happening, I mean, look at Joe Rogan. His Alex Jones show wasn't even on the iTunes chart, and yet he knew his download numbers were ridiculous. So it's what? And it, in a way, it becomes counterproductive, whatever they're attempting to do, because it's like the forbidden fruit. If I tell my kids, when I leave this house, whatever you do, don't touch this, then the first thing they're going to think about is touching it. But if I don't even put any attention to it, they're not going to even think about it. And for the record, for people who know my kids are toddlers, I wouldn't leave them at home by themselves. But my point, you never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So, my point is that there's something about saying that it's banned now. I mean, Brian Rose, the host of London Real, is calling it the banned interview, the banned video. It only makes it sexier and makes people who probably weren't even aware of the show now want to go check it out.
Yes.
So I think in many cases it's working in reverse. So
I think they know that, though, Ricky. I think they know that, and I think China is at play here. China's a big player. Everyone's focused on. So now that everyone's focused on the David interview, no one's worried about if China released this or not, or if this was some sort of manufactured thing by China. Everyone's distracted by the other thing now. And China's China's very powerful in our media and university systems.
Well, there's also something really interesting with that in regards to that Chinese reporter that was kind of it wasn't even a question. Even Trump said it wasn't a question. It was more of a statement. She's just well, China helped you with all this and no. And it was nobody's ever seen her before. And it was kind of unusual of a question. And also the fact that Trump spoke with the president of China, and next thing you know, he's not calling it the Chinese virus anymore. That, that was kind of more than coincidental, because obviously calling it the Chinese virus initially was planned, because his whole staff was calling the Chinese virus when he would go on, do these press conferences and go on stage. So it seems like it was like the Backstreet Boys. Everybody was on the same team doing the same dance moves. And so now everybody's intentionally not calling it that. So, I mean, the thing about House of Cards that's interesting, besides Kevin Spacey being a pedophile, is the fact that besides that, which is interesting enough. I mean, it is funny because that you watch that series and it's he had that gay moment, right? Which what we thought was acting. And now I'm questioning if it was acting at all. But my point is that he said in an interview when they're oh, how realistic is this? Because they had a lot of advisors and people who were in politics and lived in Washington and was in that world that helped with writing the storyline and all that stuff. And they asked him, they're how realistic is this? And compared to the stories you're being told and influences the real stories that were influencing this made up story, he's how fast we passed the bill. He's that was the least realistic thing of the show. He's everything else was pretty realistic. And so you watch something like that, people don't realize behind the puppet show how much is going on. From okay, I'm saying this a specific way because I'm trying to connect. I'm trying to I guess, create these dots so people can connect them, or I want people to perceive something, or I'm not talking about this or pushing this agenda and not pushing that agenda because of a friendship I have with this person because I've done business with them, or I'm not getting along with this guy, so fuck him, so I'm not going to help him out by so it's like there's all this chess going on behind the scenes, and we like to think like we like to watch these press conferences, or we like to watch anything that happens on TV in regards to politics, and think like, oh, what we see is what's going on. And it's like, no, it's not. I've interviewed Jack Abramoff. I've interviewed, plenty of people who've been in the behind the scenes. And, if you know the story of Jack Abramoff, I mean, he openly obviously he saw the light after he did time. What a great dude. It's only after he went to prison that he wanted to talk about how corrupt the system was, but at least he was doing it. And he did write a book, and it's believable, and people will, I think it's easier to digest when this guy didn't just hear about some of the corruption that was going on. He was a part of the corruption. And so, I mean, these guys are all bought and paid for. So to me, it's hard. It is one of those things where it's like the story's constantly changing, and we're all just trying to figure out, okay, we know what's going on TV, but what the fuck's going on behind the scenes? What's going on? The backdoor deals, the think tanks that are having influence on this, the military industrial complex, the big pharma's agenda, obviously pushing the vaccine thing. The vaccine debate was a huge topic right before all this. Like, I mean, I was supposed to have CT Freedom Alliance, which is a big organization in Connecticut that's trying to because they're fighting with the state in regards to having the religious exemptions. Like, the state wants to get rid of all exemptions, and they're fighting back on that. And so, they were supposed to be on until all this happened. And now every guest is like, well, if we're not talking about the coronavirus, you think anybody's going to want to hear what I have to say? But it does seem like we're all kind of figuring out what's going on as every day passes, and there's all these little tells. I was just listening to the No Agenda podcast earlier today, their newest episode, which I've been really talking to people about. I'm like, listen, check out I've always been a fan of their show, but they've been killing it with just picking up on all the political tells, like the little things that they pick up on, like, during this interview, Fauci said this and Burke said that, and and they take those clips, and they've done a really great job with that. And when somebody takes the time to put all those things together and analyze it, you realize, like, without a doubt, like, we might not know what's going on, but without a doubt, there's more going on than we know, and so I think there's a lot of people. I mean, even Fault Lines. I'm a fan of Fault Lines Radio. They're on RT, Sputnik Radio in the morning from like 7 to 10 or something like that. I'm a fan of their stuff. But these guys have completely taken the bait, and there's just like anybody who has a alternative perspective, they're just like, no, people are dying. People are, nobody's saying nobody's dying. We're just questioning if what they're dying from and what's actually causing it, and if these numbers are being inflated. And when you look at the stimulus package, who's getting the money? I mean, that's the thing. Like, people talk about what the respirators, for example. Tons of doctors are coming out now, whistleblowers, talking about how they're actually killing people. Okay, but yet hospitals are asking for them, because why wouldn't you want free federal resources? Why wouldn't you want free stuff? The same reason why. So we have a little family-owned construction company, and I know some of your listeners are gonna be like, "Does this guy ever shut the fuck up?" But if they listen to my show, hopefully they're used to it. But so we have a small little construction company. So we deal with like little town projects, city projects, and sometimes Mass DOT state projects. And you'll see, like, they'll just spend money just because they have it. They'll fix something that doesn't need fixing just because they're like, hey, we got a grant for this stuff. We really don't need to fix this. There's something else that really could, we could use this for, but this grant says you have to use it for this specific purpose. So if we don't use it, we lose it. So we're just going to take advantage of it. That happens all the time. The CDC has interest in making a big deal out of this because they got tons of money. The obviously pharmaceutical companies, the hospitals, the states that are getting tons of money, and respirators and all that stuff. So everybody benefits from fear-mongering, and saying like, hey, we need more of this, because why would you say you need less of it? No town ever says like, hey, all our roads they're not bad, give the money to somebody else. They're like, no, give us money, we'll find somewhere to use it. So I think a little of that is also happening.
It very well could be. Go ahead, Charlie.
I think when people are trying to judge whether or not the story we're getting is straight, and you turn on your nightly news in order to get it. And I think it's important for people to realize that in the United States, we're one of only 2 countries in the world that allows pharmaceutical ads to be run on television, us in New Zealand. And 60% of the revenue, the ad revenue for the nightly news, comes from big pharma. So if you're tuning in expecting to hear a balanced debate about the pros and cons, even before this, the pros and cons of vaccination, let's just say, if you start talking, if Anderson Cooper does a story about how vaccines have caused so much damage in this country that the VAERS court has paid out $4.2 billion in damages to patients, if he does that, the president of Merck will be in Jeff Zucker's office the next morning threatening to pull $2 billion worth of advertising if he doesn't get a hold of Anderson Cooper and tell him to shut the fuck up about the vaccines. So we do not have honest debate on your television news. Now, the older generation assumes that when you watch your nightly news, you're going to get either both sides of the story or you're only going to get the important stories discussed. That's not the case. They are not going to allow a certain conversation to happen, whether it's about the vaccines before or this current version of vaccines that they're talking about making mandatory. There's not going to be an honest debate on your nightly news about that. There's going to be one side to it, big pharma's side, in conjunction with the mainstream media that works for them. There's too much money at stake for them. So we're going to be very uneducated on the downside of what a mandatory vaccination program could mean for the United States and what it would look like. All you're going to hear is, we need to do it in order for you to go back to work. Once you get the shot, you go back to work, like they're talking about. And maybe that won't happen. Hopefully it won't. But God forbid, if that is the conversation that we're having, you think you're battling with trolls right now about stay home and don't spread and don't be 6 feet away. Wait till the mandatory vaccination program comes out and you're one of the few people saying, I'm not taking that. Oh my God, it'll be on. Everyone will be shaming you in your neighborhood, at the schools. They'll say, I don't want that kid in my classroom with his anti-vax stupid parents and blah, blah. I mean, it's going to be crazy. And so we're all fans of Alex Jones in some level. We are in an information war. There is no doubt about that. And the information, unfortunately, has been taken from us. It's controlled by these people in the government and the media and big pharma and the military industrial complex. And they certainly have an agenda that works for them. So their version of reality might be vastly different from ours, but it's the only version of reality we're going to get once they have the media in charge of it, because they're just going to spread that out. And as far as we're concerned, that'll be reality. It'll be whatever the media tells us is reality. That's reality. And all of us naysayers will be, like you said, publicly shamed and for having the audacity to think for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I want to read you guys a headline that came out a few hours ago. This is interesting. So the virus patients reporting strange new symptom, which is fizzing, adding to the growing list of awful toll on victims. A new symptom that produces a strange buzzing sensation throughout their body. The side effect reported by patients sharing their symptoms on Twitter is now being described as fizzing, which is bizarre. Like a buzzing. So this thing is causing a buzzing sensation throughout your entire body. I've never heard of anything like this before.
Yeah, here's some more symptoms: drinking too much, hating your wife, too much masturbating. I mean, what? Like, there's a lot of symptoms that this is causing because everybody's stir crazy and stuck at home. Like, it's just, I mean, eventually are they just gonna have so many symptoms that it's like, just about everybody can accuse you of having it. I mean, it is. The symptoms are so vague too. It's like, okay, a lot of things can kind of cause a cough. It's
been a running joke in my show for like the past few months. Actually, this is it right here.
I have a constant sore throat, swollen glands, fevers. My muscles ache and are weak. I am totally exhausted all the time. I have heart palpitations. I can't concentrate. I forget things. I get confused.
I mean, it's just...
I need some marijuana.
And that's just an old lady that wants marijuana. But that's her. Those are all her symptoms, but those all make you sick with it.
Yeah, well, the other thing, too, is that nobody's talking, and this is another example of the media. Obviously, there's some fuckery going on because the media is not talking about the success of vitamin C. Hospitals are doing it in New York, and hospitals are doing it in that did it in China. Zinc, all this stuff. Like nobody's giving you any positive information. It's all like doom and gloom, and it's like, why aren't we having doctors go on these shows and say, hey, take some vitamin C, exercise, find a way to leave the house, find a way to get some sunlight, some vitamin D, find a way to stay physically healthy and mentally healthy, like meditation, all that. I mean, the mind body is connected. So if you're mentally stressed, it's going to have a negative effect on your body. So when your immune system has to deal with a virus, you might be so stressed out dealing with anxiety, depression, the uncertainty of what's around the corner. And that's the thing, like all that stuff is bothering people. I mean, in a way, it would have been, if they initially just kind of said, hey, all essential work, shut it down, or all non-essential work, shut it down, everybody just go home, and we're going to try to stop the spread of this. But yet there's still something on TV. You weren't shamed if you went out in public with your family or friends. I saw people online ratting people out because they were at the park, like, oh, how dare these kids go be at the park? And I'm like, what is wrong with you? I mean, first of all, the chances of kids dying from this is slim to none. So let them fucking enjoy themselves a little bit. So to me, it's like, I've lost my train of thought, so I'm trying to gather it while I make shit up.
No, that's okay. I actually have a clip when it comes to snitching. I found this clip, and it's kind of insane that the mayor of LA said this.
Snitches get rewards.
The mayor
I thought snitches got stitches.
Well, no, he changed that because now
how dare he?
The mayor of LA said that
Snitches get rewards.
and in response to selling people out. But I agree with you. This is all wacky. This is all wacky, and I agree with you on the health side. Just take care of yourself. Do some meditation. I've been taking this time. Me and my wife every morning. We've been going out back at 10 a.m. doing breathing exercises, like getting kind of connected to nature, getting some vitamin D here in beautiful Phoenix. Do that. Relieve some stress. Don't live in the. I know what you got, cabin fever. Find a hobby. And now's the time.
Well, there's also some narrative building going on here too. When you talked about 9/11 and this being like another 9/11 in slow motion, but you see some of these similar narratives where after 9/11, first of all, 9/11, it was they did this to us. That foreign country did this to us. We have to go get them, or they're our enemies. And then, of course, the media loves that. And then there was the building up of once the wars started, there was the building up of the troops to this, putting them on a pedestal where there's like, hey, we have to support the troops, and we have to, hey, if anyone is now boarding the airplane with a young child or active duty military, please board first. Like, oh, the troops, support the troops. We're starting to see that with hospital workers as well. The banging of pots and pans and the singing on the balconies and all of this stuff, and people clapping and applauding and doing the heart, turning on the lights in the high-rise buildings in the shape of hearts and all that stuff. That's great. I understand, but it seems a little wag the dog-ish to me. It seems a little bit contrived and almost pre-planned, and a little bit more of just a built-to-order narrative that just now instantly. So, and the reason for this, if I allow my conspiratorial mind and my tinfoil hat to go full tinfoil hat retard here, I see this as a push to put the doctors and nurses and everyone up on a pedestal, so that if or when the mandatory vaccination programs are rolled out, who will be the ones administering them? Yes. The doctors, and the nurses. And if you've got them on a pedestal, it's much harder for you to question their authority later when they're trying to inject you with something that goes against your will. How dare you not take that from them? They're heroes. They're heroes, don't you know? It's just like the troops. Support the troops. Oh, well, but what about the troops that are shooting innocent civilians? No. Support the troops. That's all we do. We put yellow ribbons on the back of our cars, and we fly the American flags on our, all that stuff. It just seems very contrived to me. And I think that there's an agenda behind. I wish I didn't think this, but I wrote a book about control structures. And one of the things that you come to understand is that they create narratives. If they want to control you and force you in a certain direction, they create a very positive story that forces you down that path, that makes you start to think about, and then they let they let society then be the police force for that. They then shame you and keep you in check by social pressure. And that keeps you from standing up and going, yeah, I don't always support the troops. I'm sorry, I can't support that troop who's doing awful things. No. That conversation won't be had because the social influencers or the people that are watching you, the rats, the Gil Garcetti's or Eric Garcetti's talking about, they'll make sure that they keep you in check. So it's a very devious system that it's one that they have used this play many times before, and I'm sure we'll see it again in the future.
Big time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that the vaccination thing is going to be interesting, what's going to happen in a year or whatnot, because if this many deaths, if we decided, well, one, if society, if the country has decided that doing this is the right thing to do, if this happens again, then what's going to happen is you're going to have all this social pressure of get vaccinated. Everybody should get vaccinated, mandatory vaccines, so we don't have to go through this again. And everybody's going to pressure you into it. Like, you got to get vaccinated. Do you want to go through something like this again? Do you want the whole country to shut down again? Like, you have to get vaccinated. You have to get vaccinated. Even though there's a vaccine for the flu, and yet these numbers are not going to surpass the flu. And if they do, it's going to be probably very similar. And again, can you even believe those numbers? And what are those numbers? Are those deaths caused by this? Are they deaths caused by something else? We don't know. And so, I mean, yeah, without a doubt. And so, Mike, for example, you have obviously recently dealt with some censorship. I know that Charlie's been kicked off Twitter for a while now, but you've dealt with some censorship on your live streams. Does that make you think without a has that changed your opinion? Does that make you think like, okay, there has to be something more to this?
I know I'm playing in other people's sandboxes, and I've tried to remain fiercely independent for all the years I've been doing this podcast. Hence why I've had to become an audio engineer, build my own websites, do my own art. I just know and this is kind of like a punk rock mentality. You have to create the art you want to see. So when it comes to being shut down a little bit, I know that it is in their it's in their business model. Whatever business model they have, it is in their business model to make it as friendly as possible to whatever advertiser. And if advertisers are only comfortable advertising with CNN and MSNBC, then that's it. Everything else has got to be shut down because that's their business model. There's definitely more to it, obviously. But whether or not the other things are correct or not, I don't know. But there's always something more. These business people get together and talk. Politicians get together and talk, no matter what side they're on. They understand the outcome of the decisions they make. They understand that we will follow along for the most part, and because we just want our routines to continue. And they know this is like a major disruption to the economy. And so for them, the people who are talking to disrupt business as normal, which will impact their bottom line, means this is the biggest thing to happen since 9/11, economically, worldwide. So some very big people had to be clued in on this and had to have signed off on this and the potential outcomes, which aren't going to be good for us.
Well, I mean, I think you look at September 11th, I mean, there's a lot of people who look like, well, you know, how are people going to benefit from this or whatnot? And it's like it really wasn't super obvious until after them pushing anthrax and pushing code red, code orange, and then they end up going into Afghanistan and Iraq like, oh, okay, that was the plan all along. And I kind of feel like the same thing's happening now because, I mean, Mike, for example, your show, you talk about a lot of stuff. I mean, you talk about a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of different stuff. Like, it seems like, have you had this issue before, or is this a new?
No, I mean, so when it comes down to scandalous language, I mean, not really. We say some pretty awful stuff.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's pretty horrific, and just like 3 years ago, talking about like the death of my grandmother and that kind of like horrific stories around that never got us censored in any way whatsoever. So yeah, this is kind of the first time where in real time, they appear to be scanning the audio and looking for certain things and lining that up with the video. And then if you violate whatever algorithm, it triggers something, and then you're down, which is kind of weird. Now we are forced to self-censor to be on their platform, which is still beneficial to be there right now. So yeah, it's weird times, man. It really is.
The only time I've seen this, and I've seen it firsthand with censorship of me, was when I got on the topic of a certain school in Connecticut.
Yes.
That's the third rail topic.
Oh, okay, you're right. I have had a lot of videos taken down because of conversations like that. So I've had YouTube probably pull a total of 10 videos down.
Yeah, I've had them pull some of my videos as well. And I had Facebook back in 2019 put me in Facebook jail on 30-day stretches 3 times, just one after the other, all for videos or memes actually that I had posted on Facebook in 2017, 2 years earlier, about that particular school. And all of a sudden, like, I'll just wake up one morning in 2019 and go to, open up Facebook, and it's like the notice comes that you've been, sentenced to, 30 days in jail for this particular thing, this image. And I'm like, that was 2 years ago. What, you just figured it out now? Yeah, they just figured it out now. Like, someone just went through and saw that. And so to me, when something like that happens, and I see that there is an all-out push by social media platforms or the government or both of them in conjunction, that to me is an indicator that that is a topic that they do not want the public discussing for one reason or another, obviously. Not because it's insensitive to the victims or anything like that. It's because they don't want you talking about these events, some of the events. So you can almost gauge what's a worthwhile topic and what's not by how draconian they are in terms of trying to silence people. So like, they go after Alex Jones and they go after Jim Fetzer for their for what they said or what they wrote about that particular school in Connecticut. And it's like, whoa, they are not playing around. They'll let you talk about all kinds of other things. They'll let you talk about Boston bombing. They'll let you talk about Las Vegas to a certain extent. But if you get on that one school, ooh, boy, they just dropped the hammer on you. And a lot of that is starting to remind me of this Cinco G that we're talking about as well. Now that's starting to come up, and YouTube is saying anything that's talking about that, we're going to delete it. We're going to get rid of it. Anything that they're trying to tie Cinco G. And by the way, people, we're talking in code because we have to, if you didn't figure this out. They're tying it to the virus. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, hang on a second. This is what they did last time. There's this particular topic that is very sensitive to them. So it makes you ask, why is it sensitive? Is it sensitive because it's actually the truth? Is it sensitive because it's part of something that they don't want you to know about? I think it could be. I mean, I think it's at least reasonable to assume that these topics that they are hypersensitive to, they are hypersensitive to it for a reason. And the reason is that there is more to that story than they would like you to dig into.
Yeah. I mean, I think they err on the side. Like, if they're like, we don't know this. Take it all down. Just take it all down. We want everyone on YouTube to just talk about comic books and movies and cosmetics. That's it. That's all YouTube is. And then MSNBC and Fox. That's it.
Well, the thing is, I can if they were only pulling the videos or the people who were over the top, like people who were like, without a doubt, I know that didn't happen and you should be protesting. But it's like when you're taking people down who are just questioning things, it's interesting. Like years ago, like this was like probably the first couple of years I started my podcast. I had Ben Bolin, host of Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. Are you guys familiar with the podcast? And so he was on like a long time ago, and this was before my podcast grew, and this was before I don't even know if he had a podcast at the time. He might have still only been doing the videos. And we talked about that Connecticut school, and we talked about that stuff, and like when his show got when I really blew up. And I'm like, I wonder if that got him in trouble. And, because we went pretty deep into the rabbit hole in regards to that topic. And I know how taboo it is now. And I remember trying to get him back on my show and nobody would get back to me. And I'm like, wait, I know I have his email because, we were in contact prior to this. And I know I have other people's email who work for the company and nobody would get back to me. I'm like, I wonder if they're like, this motherfucker's going to bring that shit up again. and we work for the Discovery Channel or whoever it is, whoever owns stuff they don't want you to know, whatever big network or company owns it. And the whole How Stuff Works network. And maybe they're worried that they're going to say something that's not politically correct. And to me, what's bothersome is that these conversations, like, nobody's been willing to defend the right to have these conversations. People are just like, no, you shouldn't be questioning things like this topic. We've decided as a society is off limits. This is a topic you can't question. Like, I've used Holocaust denier ism or whatever as an example. Like, Germany, they don't let you question it, right? And I can understand why, but if it's that ridiculous, like, shouldn't we just say, like, hey, like, let that person humiliate himself? Like, if you're going to try to defend that, humiliate yourself. Same thing with, like, America deciding that you can't bring up flat Earth, like, you can't talk about it. You can, like, the fact that there's a law for that, to me, is a problem, because it's like the whole point of freedom of speech is to defend unpopular speech. Popular speech doesn't need any rights or freedom, doesn't need any defending of those freedoms. Like, you can, if you're saying what's popular, then if we only said what's popular, then there's no need for rights for that right. That's just it would have been just an unspoken rule. But the reason why it needs to be clarified and people need to acknowledge that it is a right is because the unpopular speech still has the right to say things. Because, again, if we lived in a different time, in a different era, there's a lot of things that seem silly now that would have been taboo then. I mean, if we lived, so many years ago where blacks and whites were in different schools, different water fountains, and we said, hey, you know what, this is ridiculous, we should all come together. And if we're doing podcasts, then they'd be like, well, let's flag all these motherfuckers who are talking about these ridiculous things of us all being genetically the same, and us should be, that this whole thing about separation of race and whatnot is a silly idea. Like, we could be those rebels at that time, so it's like, that's the way people have to look at it. There's a lot of things that are socially acceptable and that aren't right, and maybe should be questioned and should be discussed and should be talked about. And I think you have the most interesting conversations when you talk to people that you don't agree with. Like, who wants to only talk to people that they agree with all the time? Because that'd be a pretty boring conversation. I want to talk to people who are going to challenge some of my ideas, because in the process of me, I guess, figuring out my response, I'm also going to figure out where I stand on this issue. Do I really have it thought out? And where are the origins of my ideas? Like, were they thought out, or did I just pick a team too prematurely and I didn't really think it out? So I think it's important to discuss the most taboo of topics.
I think for me, it comes down to the attempt. This is the American spirit, and we support people's attempt to create, to explore, which is dangerous. We support people's attempt to make a joke, which could wind up offending somebody or being completely brilliant. We support people's attempt to create a beautiful painting that could offend or enlighten people. We also supported people's attempt to explore, which they could discover a new land, or they could wind up dead. That attempt, that being in support of attempt is lost now. Now it's just kind of like, well, what is the end result? We only care what the end result is, and whether or not it offends a group of people. We don't care about your attempt at all, which runs counter to what this country was founded on.
Well, you guys know about that Patrice O'Neill segment when he was on Fox News, and that's what he was arguing with that white lady about, like, well, if I get a laugh, then all of a sudden there's nothing wrong with it. But if I don't get a laugh, even though my intentions are the same of trying to be funny, then all of a sudden it's looked at completely different. And he's like, you don't know if you're going to get a laugh or not until you do it, So to me, intentions are very important. Like, if you're purposely just seeking truth, seeking answers, then that should be okay. If you're purposely trying to be funny, if your intentions are to say something humorous, like the Ari thing that happened with Kobe Bryant and whatnot. Like, okay, was he a little over the top? Probably, but that's Ari. I mean, that's kind of what he's known for. He's known. I'm like, I don't even want to say his full name because I don't know if that'll get us kicked off. But it is one of those things where, like, I think his intentions were to be funny, and if you watch enough of his work, I mean, he had that those hilarious videos back in the day. What was it, like, the where he would play like a racist, or the, well, you know what I'm talking about, when in one clip. Well, what the hell was? I'll have to look it up, but to get the title for it, because they're hysterical. And like, it was like these little like skits where one skit was him being this this priest that was going to, I think, a Jewish a grocery store, and he had this petition. He was trying to get the Jewish people there shopping there to sign this petition apologizing to Jesus. And it was hysterical. And he's Jewish. So like, they didn't even know that he was actually Jewish, and he was the one, you know, who looked insensitive to Jews. But it was hysterical. So it's like, if you know his work, you realize like, okay, this guy will really go over and beyond to get a laugh. So that's what he was attempting to do. And he probably was, and I believe he was a fan of Kobe Bryant. It wasn't anything personal to him. Could it be looked at as insensitive? Yeah, because I mean, obviously, some family members or some friends of Kobe could watch the video and be like, what an asshole. But it is one of those things where, I mean, that's kind of the price we pay for having a free world, is like, sometimes people are going to say shit that's going to rub you the wrong way and that you're not going to like. And I'm okay with that, because I can just not watch it. I can just go to the next channel. I can listen to the next podcast. I can watch the next show. Like, I can just tune out. And really, I mean, that's really your best way of protesting anyways, is just don't give them your clicks, don't give them your views, don't give them your money. And that way, nobody has to be censored.
Yeah. Hey guys, I hate to break this up, but I got to get out of here in about 10 minutes. We've been going for, oh my God, an hour.
Yeah, I feel like we're on the Rogan show. Like, oh shit, it's been 3 hours already.
It's only been an hour, but I got to get out of here soon. Why don't we, I'd like to know about Charlie's podcast and Ricky, your podcast. Can you describe your podcast for us?
Okay, I'll start. My podcast is called Macroaggressions, and the video version of it is on David Icke's. Oops, maybe I can't say that word.
Oh my God.
Uh-oh, I just got you. The live stream is
right
done.
At the very end.
I didn't have my beeps ready, but go ahead.
David Bleep's new video podcast, or his video platform called Iconic. You can find it there, but the audio version is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and iHeartRadio. And what it is, there's two parts to it. Part of it is just a monologue podcast that I'm doing that's just topic specific, and the other is interviews. And Ricky, you were mentioning you had Whitney Webb. Well, I had Whitney Webb on too. Her interview will be up on Sunday. She gets into some really interesting stuff as she did with you and yours about the new article that she's working on. So I do a little both. Half the episodes are monologues and half the episodes are interviews with interesting people. I had Sam Tripoli on last week, and Whitney Webb's coming up this week. I've got James Perloff and some other interesting dudes that I've already recorded and will be coming out soon. So if people want to go to Macroaggressions, subscribe. I'm fairly new. I've only been out for the last 5 weeks now.
Oh, wow.
But you know, I've been in this world for a little while, but just as far as the podcast itself goes, I had enough people saying, you got to do one, that finally I broke down and said, all right, the world needs another podcast, like it needs a hole in its head, but I'm going to do it anyway.
I would disagree with you, Charlie. I think we do need more podcasts because, you know, I think anytime, well, at least good podcasts, stuff like your show. You also had a great show with James Corbett, which I loved, and I think there's not enough of us, you know, because I think if it was so overwhelming, maybe we would have more pull than we do at the moment, you know. And but I mean, I guess on the other end, look at somebody like Alex Jones, who had a huge empire, and they could even take him down from all the mainstream stuff. But I'm going to go on a long rant. That's what you're going to get in my podcast. Every once in a while, you're going to get me ranting. And but my show is a little bit of everything. It's I think it is dominated. Probably the majority of the shows are going to be about history and maybe alternative perspectives on stuff, you know, like Gerard Williams, who wrote The Escape of Adolf Hitler, and alternative media people, other authors like Charlie Robinson's been on my show, and James Corbett, and so many, Sam Tripoli, it's also, and stuff like that. But I also have a lot of just comedians on. I've had I think years ago when I had Jimmy Dore on, we talked about comedy a lot. I had Ian Baggs on. I've had musicians on, like singer of Fear Factory, Burton C. Bell, and then the singer of 1 Minute Silence, and Hacktivist which is a great kind of political rap rock metal band from the UK, which really is outspoken about their views, which I love. But my point is, it's a little bit of everything. It's Joe Rogan's show years ago was really one of my huge influences in regards to, I loved the fact that every episode, it wasn't on the same topic. You never knew what type of guest he was going to have on, what they're going to talk about. And I think it really helped with getting people who maybe didn't know much about MMA, but tuned in because he was a comedian, learn about MMA, and people who didn't know too much about MMA, but yet, tune in for some other reason. And then next thing you know, got exposed to Dennis McKenna or Graham Hancock or whoever it may be. So I'm kind of hoping to do the same thing where I'll have somebody who maybe is not just the alternative media world, not in that world. And, just recently, like I said, I had a Portuguese Bellator fighter, Pedro Carvalho, and hoping that some people who tuned in to see an interview with a MMA fighter, up and coming MMA fighter, will be like, well, who, what's this other guest, or who's that other guest, or whatnot, and be exposed to some really interesting stuff. And one thing you'll learn too is that a lot of people that you don't expect to have these type of discussions that I think about bigger issues and deeper issues. A lot of times I have these type of discussions with artists. Cell Dweller is one that comes to mind. He's a electronic music artist that we went really deep into how much he loves George Orwell and a lot of different things, the government spying on you and all this stuff. And it's like, it's fun to have these type of very free, open discussions. Everything's unrehearsed, there's no questions that I prepare or anything like that. And so I think that's what people like about the show. And it's available everywhere. If anybody wants to see it, you can go on YouTube. Like Mike, even though I feel like a lot of people like ourselves are being suppressed on YouTube, if we get one new view or one new subscriber or somebody new exposed to these topics from YouTube, then I guess it's still worth using. Yeah. But you can, it's available everywhere. You can get digital downloads, Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff. So yeah, it's about a little bit about everything.
Yeah.
And Mike,
Ricky, have you interviewed Penis Man yet?
Yes.
Because that is not something
Penis Man.
You got to get into Penis Man, because this is where the good stuff is.
Yeah,
I'm just telling you.
I guess I'll talk about OBDM, Our Big Dumb Mouth. I normally host a show with my friend Joe. He could not be here. He's probably busy playing Call of Duty. But if I had to describe Our Big Dumb Mouth, it is a cross between the movie Die Hard and UHF. It's
John Boy.
It's crazy. It's like sound effects all the time. We cover paranormal topics like Skinwalker Ranch, Missing 411, UFOs, but also some conspiracies, stuff that we talked about today, current events, and off the beaten path news topics like people like Penis Man.
Penis Man.
Or the infamous serial pooper.
The infamous serial pooper.
Those are real news stories. There's a guy in Akron that's kept shitting on people's cars, and we followed him everywhere.
Thing ever. It's the greatest.
But we cover stories like that. We do it twice a week. We do it live, and normally we take phone calls. It's an insane show. And people, if you're just hearing this now, if you wind up listening to the OBDM podcast, you have to listen to at least 2 episodes, and then you'll get it. And that's it.
Look, I have my own podcast, and my favorite podcast is OBDM, and Ricky knows that for a fact, because when he was on your show, I was sending him an email. I was like, "Dude, you're on OBDM. I didn't know you." I was very excited, so I can vouch for Mike when I say you've got to get into that show. It is so bananas, and it's so great. I mean, they don't take it. It's serious topics delivered in a non-serious way, and I'm sad that Joe's not here, because I love his anger. It's great. Yeah. And
more white supremacy.
That's Joe right there.
Yay! It's everywhere.
Oh my God, Joe, you're the best. I'm sorry I can't tell you in person, but I love your shit. So
yeah, and I think your show more than ever is necessary, because I think it can get depressing talking about this shit all the time, it can bring you down. And you do talk about important topics, but you can laugh about it, and you can, and then next thing you know, there's a joke, or there's some, like you said, you get completely off the path and you talk about something else. And I think it can get depressing just talking about this all the time. And I think that's why so many people love Sam Tripoli, right? Or Joe Rogan, or, because it's like they can talk about serious stuff, but then around any corner, it could be a dick joke,
Yeah.
So it's, I think it lightens things up a little bit. So I think, all these shows are necessary in their own way. Absolutely.
Oh, guys, you couldn't have said it better. I had a great time doing this with you guys, man. This has been fantastic. We should really do this again.
Yeah.
We have more time. All right. Well, I'll email you guys. I got the MP3. I'll send you guys a link to this here soon. I'll process it. You'll probably have a link here in about an hour or two. So
Cool.
Awesome.
I appreciate you guys' time. It's Charlie. I'll leave links for you guys in the description and all that stuff.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, yeah,
Appreciate
thanks,
it,
and thanks for going through the work of recording all this stuff too. Because
no
Charlie and I don't have we don't have a good excuse to not record it because we do record podcasts. So the fact that you're taking all that workload is appreciated.
We appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you to all the live listeners. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning doing a show.
See ya. Take care.